Wine is the Christian drink. But as Presbyterians, we know that we are so stiff and hung up that wine won't do the trick for us. We go for scotch. Do I have a witness? Now. We're in Judges 13 tonight. And we're going to begin in Judges 13, and then we're going to go back into the book of Numbers. We have to do this. But in chapter 13, we read, "Now the sons of Israel did again evil in the sight of Yahweh, so that Yahweh gave them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Now, you don't realize this, I suppose, but if we were to read the whole book of Judges from beginning, we would find that when God got mad at the people, He would sell them into the hands of one of their enemies. Sell them back into slavery. Sell them back under bondage. At least on those earlier occasions, the Lord got something out of the deal. But He's so disgusted with them this time that He just gives them away. And that's the contrast. He gave them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. And there was a certain man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah. And his wife was barren and had borne no children. Then the angel of Yahweh appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, now you are barren and have not borne any, but you shall conceive and give birth to a son. Now therefore be careful not to drink wine or strong drink, which means beer. They didn't have distilled spirits in the ancient world. Too bad for them. I'm sorry. They didn't have distilled spirits in the ancient world, and so the reference is to beer. Beer is brewed up from grain, and then wine is made from grapes, and grapes and grain are the two fundamental things, along with olives, in the word anyway. So he's not to drink wine or beer, or eat any unclean thing. For behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the boy shall be a Nazirite from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines. He will only begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines. I mentioned to you last night how Samson works for 20 years doing strange things here and there and begins to deliver Israel from the Philistines. And then at the end of his life, he brings down all the nobility and all the kings and all the priests and all the military commanders of the Philistines and kills them all at one blow. Immediately after that, Samuel calls up the Israelite army, and they go and defeat what's left of the Philistine army, and Samuel completes the deliverance of Israel from the Philistines at that time. So there's this relationship between Samson and Samuel that we mentioned last night. Tonight we're going to look at this business of his being a Nazirite from the womb. And we have to look back at Numbers chapter 6 in order to reacquire or acquire for the first time some understanding of the Nazirite vow. So let's look back at Numbers chapter 6, and I want to read this whole passage to you, even though we won't go into all the details. If we did, we'd be here a very long time. Numbers chapter 6. Again Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, When a man or a woman makes a special vow, the vow of a Nazirite, to live as a Nazirite to Yahweh, and Nazirite means someone who's separated, he shall abstain from wine and beer. He shall drink no vinegar, whether made from wine or beer. Neither shall he drink any grape juice or eat fresh grapes or raisins. Raisins are made from grapes, right? Right. All the days of his Naziritehood, he shall not eat anything that is produced by the grapevine, from the seeds even to the skin. All the days of the vow of his separation, no razor shall pass over his head. He shall be holy until the days are fulfilled for which he separated himself unto Yahweh. He shall let the locks of the hair on his head grow long. All the days of his separation to Yahweh he shall not go near a dead corpse. He shall not make himself unclean for his father or for his mother or for his brother or for his sister when they die, because his separation to God is on his head. All the days of his separation he is holy to Yahweh. But if a man die very suddenly beside him, and he defile his dedicated head, then he shall shave his head. On the day he becomes clean, he shall shave it on the 7th day. Then on the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtle doves and 2 young pigeons to the priest to the doorway of the tent of meeting, and the priest shall offer one for a purification offering and the other for an ascension offering, and make atonement for him concerning his sin because of the corpse. And on the same day he shall consecrate his head, and shall dedicate to Yahweh his days as a separated Nazirite, and shall bring a male lamb a year old as a reparation offering. But the former days shall be invalidated because his separation was defiled. Now this is the law of the Nazirite when the days of his separation or Naziritehood are fulfilled. He shall bring the offering to the doorway of the tent of meeting, and shall present his offering to Yahweh. 1 male lamb a year old without defect for an ascension offering, and 1 ewe lamb a year old without defect for a purification offering, and 1 ram without defect for a peace offering, and a basket of unleavened cakes of fine flour mixed with oil, and unleavened wafers spread with oil, along with their tribute offering and their libations. A libation is a drink offering, wine poured out. Represents blood poured out. Then the priest shall present them before Yahweh, and shall offer his purification offering and his ascension offering. He shall also offer the ram for a sacrifice of peace offerings to Yahweh, together with the basket of unleavened cakes. The priest shall likewise offer its tribute offering and its libation. The Nazirite shall then shave his dedicated head at the doorway of the tent of meeting, and shall take the dedicated hair of his head and put it on the fire that is under the sacrifice of peace offerings. And the priest shall take the ram's shoulder when it's been boiled, and 1 unleavened cake out of the basket, and 1 unleavened wafer, and shall put them on the hands, or the palms, literally, of the Nazirite after he has shaved his Nazirite, after he has shaved his dedicated thing, which is his head. Then the priest shall wave them or lift them up for a lifted up offering before Yahweh. It is holy for the priest, together with the breast offered by lifting up and the thigh offered by a contribution. And afterward the Nazirite may drink wine. Interesting. This is the law of the Nazirite who vows his offering to Yahweh according to his separation, in addition to what else his hand can reach. According to his vow that he takes, so shall he do according to the law of his Naziritehood. Complicated, isn't it? Well, we can't look into all the details of his sacrifices that he offers. But what we do need to understand is what a Nazirite was and what his purpose was. Throughout this passage, we read that it is the head of the Nazirite that's consecrated. It's not his hair that's consecrated. It's not his body that's consecrated. It's his head that's consecrated. And all the hair that grows out of his head during the time that he's consecrated, that hair that grows out of his head is special. And it has to be cut off at the end of the vow and burned up and sent up to God. The fire that burned on the altar represented the presence of God on the altar, because God is a consuming fire. And anything that's put into that fire is put into God, is put into union with God. And that's what it means for a sacrifice to be given to God, is to be put into the fire. It's as if God was right here and God was warm and we cuddled up to him. Are you cold? Is the air conditioning making you cold in here? Well, I suggest you just kind of snuggle up to the person next to you. Because people are warm. People are 98 degrees warm. And so we like to snuggle up to people. And little kids like to sit on their parents' lap and snuggle in. And mom and dad snuggle up together on the sofa. or into bed. Sometimes they get so warm they move apart from each other. People are warm, and God is warm. And that's what it means that God is fiery. God is warm. Now, God's fire burns up the wicked. They're just toast when they get near Him. But we, because we're in Jesus, we get warmed up by being around God. The Bible says that we are made of gold, silver, and precious stones, where the wicked are made of wood, hay, and stubble. If you put wood, hay, and stubble into a fire, it's burned up. But if you put gold and silver or bronze into a fire, it just gets warm and shiny. And when we get into God and God gets into us, He warms us up and we become shiny, like shiny bronze. And the dross is melted off of us and we become more and more golden and silvery. God warms us up, and that's what His fire is, the fire of His presence. That altar in Israel was the main fireplace or hearth in Israel. Have you ever gone on a camp out? What happens at night? Everybody gathers around the fire. And in Israel, everybody gathered around God's fire. Every Sabbath day, people were not allowed to burn their own fires at home. Only God's fire at the center was allowed to burn real bright. And the picture was that everybody was gathered around it. Maybe you remember a story in the Gospels, a very significant story. You see, if you don't gather around God's fire, you're going to have to find another fire to gather around. And what did Peter do when he betrayed Jesus? There was another fire out there. And Peter wanted to be around that fire. And there was a bunch of people gathered around that fire warming themselves. And Peter decided he wanted to be in that group. And so Peter went over to that group that was gathered around that fire. And they said, "Hey, you sound like a Galilean. You sound like you're from Georgia." And Peter said, "No, not me. I'm from Pennsylvania." Peter wanted to be part of that group of people gathered around that fire. He had just finished having the Lord's Supper with Jesus. And what do we have at the Lord's Supper? Wine. And how does wine make you feel? Warm. Yep. You see, Peter had left God's fire, and so he had to find another fire. That's what that passage is all about. That's why there's big stress on that other fire that's there. And when you put something in the fire, it goes up an elevator of smoke into God's presence. You were putting it into Him, and it also goes up to Him. Both pictures are true. And the Nazirite, when he takes the hair off his head, all the hair that's grown during the time that he did his work, he sends it up to God. He offers his works up to God. That's the basic thing. His head is dedicated, and what grows out of his head is given to God. Now you may remember, back in Genesis chapter 3, God said to the serpent that the serpent would bruise the heel of the seed, but the seed would crush his head. And the book of Judges, head crushing is a big theme. If we think back in the book of Judges, you remember the story of Deborah and how during the battle of Megiddo, the captain of the wicked, whose name was Sisera, fled the battlefield and came to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber. And she gave him some yogurt to drink, and that made him sleepy because he got warm. And then while he was asleep, she took a tent peg and she took out his head. I think if a movie was ever made of the book of Judges, it probably had to be X-rated for stuff like this. I mean, you know, even movies nowadays don't... Well, sometimes they show heads busting, I guess. But, yeah, it's just pretty gruesome stuff. Head pop. And then we saw last night, I was pointing out that when King Abimelech was roaming around the countryside seeking whom he might devour, a woman dropped a stone from a tower, and it hit him on the head and crushed his head. Now, Samson is a big head crusher. In fact, a Nazirite is a head crusher par excellence. That's what it means to be a Nazirite. A Nazirite dedicates his head so he can go out and crush other people's heads. In fact, this business of head crushing not only refers to the literal head, but to the head of a society. Ehud. What does Ehud do, the judge? It's the first big story in Judges. Ehud goes to Eglon, big old fat Eglon. Eglon means fatted calf. And he says, I got a present for you. And then he sticks him in the stomach with a knife. And he sticks a knife in so far that his fat closed around it. Isn't this great stuff? And then other interesting things happen that we won't mention. But you kill the head. And then in the story of Gideon, Gideon kills Zebah and Zalmunna. And he kills Oreb and Zeeb, the chiefs of the enemy. And when we were in Vietnam, don't you remember what we did in Vietnam? We didn't send 50,000 boys over there to get killed. And we didn't spend a bunch of time killing Vietnamese teenagers and putting a load of guilt on our soldiers that they would carry for the rest of their lives. No, we just sent in a team and took out Ho Chi Minh. That's what we should have done. You don't make war on teenagers. You make war on warmongers. You take out the head. That's a fundamental principle of warfare that we don't respect. In fact, in our whole civilization, we've had this business about kings respect other kings. You know, two countries go to war with each other, and after it's over, the kings come and shake hands, and everything is fine. Meanwhile, there are bodies everywhere. Now, in the Bible, what happened after King Saul fell into sin and Saul defeated the Amalekites? Well, here comes King Agag, king of the Amalekites. And Saul says, oh, king to king, hi, shake your hand. What'd Samuel do? He chopped Agag to pieces. That's another good story. This business of national leaders buddying up to each other and killing all their young men, that's not biblical. You take out the head. It's what Jesus did. He took out the devil. When you take out the head, everybody else runs away. And a Nazirite is somebody who is dedicated to the holy war. Now, the holy war is usually the battlefield. But sometimes the holy war is something else entirely. Now, I want you to tell me about the Nazirites that you know about in the Bible. Samson is one of them. Okay? Who else in the Bible was a Nazirite from the womb? We're talking about somebody who had long hair, braided into 7 locks, who never drank wine, who never ate any raisins, who never had any grape leaves wrapped around lamb, no doma, nothing. Who else? Who else was a permanent Nazirite from his birth up? Do you know? Who? John the Forerunner. What's this John the Baptist stuff? This is a Presbyterian church, man. John the Forerunner, if you don't mind. Yes, John the Forerunner was one. And also, who else? Samuel. That's right. Samuel was a Nazirite. And see, Samuel was born about the same time as Samson. We saw that. They grew up together. They went to high school together. They were friends their whole lives. Samuel. Now tell me about some people in the Bible who took the temporary Nazirite vow. Paul. How many times did Paul take it? Twice. Paul took the Nazirite vow twice. We're going to get to Paul. I want somebody in the Old Testament. You know of anybody in the Old Testament that took the Nazirite vow temporarily? I don't think you do. I'm going to ask you to just keep your fingers there in Numbers chapter 6 and look at Judges chapter 5. Okay, has everybody finished flipping? Judges 5. We'll start at the beginning. It says, Then Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying. And then what does it say? You may have to look in the margin of your Bible. It says, that locks hung loose in Israel, that the people volunteered, bless Yahweh. That long locks of hair hung loose in Israel, that the people volunteered. What's she saying? She's saying that the army took the Nazirite vow, and they all let their hair grow, and it all grew out into locks as they got ready for the battle. And so their whole army that Barak got together under Deborah's supervision was an army of Nazirites. And as a matter of fact, that's implied other places. That frequently the Israelites, when they went out to fight holy war, they took the Nazirite vow, and after the battle was over, then they all became skinheads and put their hair on the fire and grew their hair back. But they had to keep it short. You know, the Bible tells us that men in Israel wore their hair short. Jesus wore his hair short. Let's see, where is the passage that tells us this? It's in Ezekiel. Might as well give you this. Yeah, Ezekiel 44, verse 20, talks about priests and Levites, but it really applied to everybody. They shall not shave their heads, yet they shall not let their locks hang loose. They shall trim the hair of their heads. So men, if your hair gets long enough to start forming locks, it's time to go to the barber. Now, the next person in the Scripture that we know took the Nazirite vow only took it for a very short time. And who was that? This is a dead giveaway because this person fulfilled everything that was in the Old Testament. His name was Jesus. But when did Jesus take the Nazirite vow? At the Last Supper. He said, I will not drink the fruit of the vine with you again until I drink it anew in the kingdom. Jesus takes the Nazirite vow and he goes to the cross, and they offered him sour wine and he rejected it. And then he hanged on the cross and he said, it is finished, and they offered him sour wine and he took it because his work was finished. And then we find Paul takes a Nazirite vow twice. His second missionary journey, the whole journey, he was under this holy war vow and his hair was growing and he had to go to Jerusalem and go through these sacrifices to end it. And then his third missionary journey also, he let his hair grow. And then he went to Jerusalem to do the sacrifices to end it. And that was still possible because the temple was still standing. Well, it's not possible for us to take the Nazirite vow in the New Testament any longer because the temple is gone and we can't do these sacrifices to end it. In a sense, we're all Nazirites and we don't need to look at the details. But we need to understand that this is a picture of Jesus and it's a picture of us. It's a picture of those who made special vows to God before Jesus. It's a picture of Jesus' own work on the cross, and it's a picture of Paul's work afterwards, so it continues to be a picture for us of our work. Now, all the things that the Nazirite does are symbolized by his hair. Let's say I take a Nazirite vow. My vow is that I am not going to shave my head until I have written a commentary on the book of Revelation and get it finished up. So about 10 years from now, I have long hair. And I finished writing my commentary on Revelation. That's my holy war task. And so I go to the temple and I offer these sacrifices and I cut off all my hair and I offer it on the altar. All that hair represents all the work I did. It represents my commentary on the book of Revelation. It represents what I did during the time that I was growing the hair. And that is given to God. So the glory of all my works is given to God. The works themselves remain, but the glory of the works is given to God. Why? Because hair is glory. That's what it says in 1 Corinthians. The woman has long hair as her glory. The man has short hair because he's not allowed to have any glory. Not quite. Now, at this point, I am going to enter into a parenthesis with you, which I've got to do. So I must fortify myself with some Diet Coke. We are entering into a consideration of symbolism in the Bible. And the Bible is full of symbolism, as you know if you've ever tried to read it. You know how you read the book of Exodus. You work your way up to chapter 20, and then you start getting into these laws, and it's kind of dense, but you can work through it. And then you get to all the stuff about the tabernacle, and you start to flip through. Then you hit the golden calf, and you can read that. And then you get more stuff about the tabernacle, and you kind of flip through, and you get to Leviticus, and it's all this stuff about sacrifices. And you're returning pages here. Is there anything that I can understand? No. And then you get into Numbers, and the first 10 chapters of Numbers are full of stuff like this Nazirite vow, and it's just Greek to me. Actually, it's Hebrew. That's the symbolism. And the whole second half of the book of Joshua is about how the Israelites were disposed in the land, and that's kind of hard to follow. And then when you're talking about symbolism, there's a lot of it in the Psalms. Then you get over into the prophetic books. Well, you've got Solomon's temple. That's kind of hard to understand. 3 or 4 chapters devoted to that. The whole book of 1 Chronicles, which tells you all about where the Levites stood. Some of them stood on the parbar. Remember that? You know what the parbar is. I don't either. But they stood there. And there's all kinds of stuff about those Levites. And there are 24 courses of Levites. And there were chief priests and chief Levites and singers and gatekeepers and musicians. And they're all listed and where they stood and what they did and which months of the year they came. Oh, it's complicated. And then you get over into Ezekiel. The whole book of Ezekiel is written in symbols. Half of Daniel. Zechariah, the ultimate killer book of the Bible. Big hunks of Jeremiah and other books. Then you've got Jesus' predictions about the destruction of Jerusalem in Matthew 24 and parables. There's stuff in the book of Hebrews, Revelation. It's all written in symbol. Symbol is another language, folks. Symbol is a different language. And it's a language that you have to learn. And when you were growing up, chances are most of you learned English. And now you've grown up. And now you're going to have to learn Russian. So how do you learn Russian? Well, first thing you're going to have to do is learn the Russian alphabet, okay? We can just write a few of the letters down here, and you can see just how impossible they are. We have A, and then we have B, and we have V, and then we have G, and we have D, and we have Ye, and we have Yo. There they are, and we have interesting letters like Sha and Cha, and all these other fun letters that show up in Russian. You got to learn the alphabet first, then you learn how to put letters together in words. You form words like Yatit, or Zdravstvuyte, or Zheleznodorozhny. I can't even pronounce this stuff anymore. But you learn how to put letters together in words, and you have to memorize vocabulary words. Then you have to put the words together in sentences and learn how to say sentences. Okay, so you learn to say, how are you? Как вы поживаете? And you learn to say, хорошо. А как вы? Which means, I'm fine, how are you? You have to learn to say sentences. Put words together in sentences and learn how to make your voice go up and down the right way. And the sing-song in every language is different, and so you have to learn the sing-song that's in Russian. Then you get to where you can write whole paragraphs, and finally you get to where you can dream in Russian. One day you wake up and you've actually dreamed a dream, and everybody was talking Russian, and then you've arrived, okay? Then you know a language. You know a language when you can dream in it. Chances are you're going to have to go to Moscow, or Moscovia, and spend some time, there, and learn, your Russian. Symbolism is the same way. The book of Revelation is just written in symbol. John assumes that you know every last thing that's in the Bible that's ever happened up to that point. And so he just kind of flows these symbols along. And it's like a foreign language that's flowing along. Now the alphabet is stuff like stars, trees, and what kinds of trees? Well, there are myrtle trees, cypress trees, cedar trees, acacia trees, olive trees, terebinth trees. There's the tree of life, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There is the watcher or almond tree. Different trees in the Bible. These are all the parsing or the cases in which you find the word tree showing up. There's so the nominative case, and the genitive case, and the accusative case, and the ablative case, and the instrumental case, the locative case, and the vocative case. Each different kind of tree, different kinds of stones. There's bdellium and onyx and gold and silver and bronze and iron, and they're just plain rocks. And then there's chrysoprase and chrysolite, amethyst, sardius, sardion, all these different stones. Then you got stars, different stars show up in the Bible. The bear, the constellations actually is what they are. The bear and Orion and the seven sisters and the woman and the dragon, those are all constellations in the sky that are mentioned in the Bible by name. Scorpions. Comets are mentioned in the Bible. They're trumpet-shaped comets, bowl-shaped comets. Yes, that's sky stuff. That's just the vocabulary. Then you got to learn how these things are kind of put together in packages. One package is the tabernacle package. You go inside the tabernacle and there's two rows of cherubim, a row of cherubim up here and a row of cherubim down here, and they're on a blue, red, and purple tapestry with white linen. And then there's a gold bar in between them. And then over here, there's this table of show bread or face bread with 12 loaves of bread on it, and they're changed out every week. And then there are flagons of beer. Beer is poured out every day in the tabernacle into a beer stein that sits on the table of showbread. I'm not making this up. This is in Numbers 28. I bet you didn't know that. And then there's this altar of incense, and we're told how to make the incense. The incense has to be made of onycha and stactum and other ingredients, and we're told all about them. But you see, we can't just look at those things individually. We have to look at how they're kind of put together in the tabernacle to form an environment. Got the 7 lamps over here, and they're looking at the 12 loaves over here and watching over them. And there's the altar here. Cherubim are all around. This is kind of a paragraph here. But then that configuration undergoes a historical transformation and becomes the temple. And in the temple, we've got 10 tables with bread on them and 10 lampstands along here. And all the proportions are twice as big. And there are flowers along the walls in the temple. And we don't just have a veil in the temple in front. We've got 2 big old olive doors and a gold chain hung in front of it. Then we get to Ezekiel's temple. Oh man, it's even more complicated. The whole system is transformed again. This is a language. It's a whole nother language. And you can only learn that language by starting with the alphabet and moving up to the vocabulary and then learning to put together in sentences and paragraphs. And you don't know that language, do ya? And neither did I, and I don't know it all that well. We have done our theology in the Protestant church by using this part of the Bible, Paul's letters. And we have not done our theology using all this other stuff. But this is just as important. It was important for God to spend a whole lot of chapters putting this stuff out. And God wants us to learn this to where we feel at home in it. When you speak the English language, you just speak it automatically. You don't sit down and think, now what word shall I use next? It just kind of comes boiling out of your mouth, doesn't it? Comes out of mine anyway. But boy, when we get into the symbolism stuff, it's, gosh, how come first of all he has a purification offering and it's a ewe lamb, and then there's an ascension offering that's a ram, and what is going on in there? Wafers, he's got to have both cakes of fine flour and wafers spread with oil. Now, what's the difference between cakes of fine flour and wafers spread with oil? Beats me. But there is some difference there. Now, when I come back here next year, I expect... Now, you see, if we could learn this, wouldn't it be amazing if we were so familiar with this that we could read it and it would just make sense as we read it? We wouldn't have to sit and think about everything and try to figure it out. Well, that's what we have to do. We're way behind the 8 ball on this one. But here we are. In the Nazirite vow, we have this. And now I'm going to tell you some things that are going to seem kind of strange to you, as if I were speaking in Russian, but I want to go ahead and do it, and you will, I hope, appreciate it. Hair is glory. Hair grows out of your head. Now, 1 Corinthians chapter 11 tells us that the woman's head grows hair, and that is her glory. But the head of the woman is the husband. And he doesn't grow hair, because what is it that grows out of a man's head that is his glory? Hair grows out of the woman's head that is her glory. What grows out of the man's head that is his glory? It's his wife. The woman is the glory for the man. The woman's glory is on her head. The man's glory is his wife. Now, in Christian civilization, we understand that. Women wear makeup and men don't. Women wear earrings and men don't. Women wear jewelry. Men don't. Women dress up in colorful garments. But what happens if you go to a formal dance or a formal event, a formal party? The man wears formal evening wear. What does that look like? It's a black open coat with long black tails behind and a white shirt and a white tie and black shoes. It's white and black. But how does his wife dress? She has on a brightly colored thing with a flower here and some hat, all colored up. The man glorifies his wife. He gives her jewelry. He gives her pretty clothes. He lavishes stuff on her. Isn't that true? Now, in pagan cultures, it's the other way around. You go over to Saudi Arabia, and the women are going around in these black things that cover their whole bodies. You know what the GIs called those women? They called them BMOs, black moving objects. And the men are the peacocks. In paganism, the men are the peacocks and the women are plain. That's not right. Jesus had no form or beauty that we should desire him. Jesus was so ordinary looking that when they would come and get him, he would just disappear into the crowd. He looked like everybody else. He was not a head taller than everybody else. He didn't have blue eyes and he didn't have brown hair. He didn't have long hair. He looked exactly like all those other Jews. He was just a plain old guy like everybody else. But now the bride he glorifies. The Bible says men have to be willing to die so their wives can be pretty. So the hair that grows from the man's head is his bride. And the labors of the Nazirite are to beautify the bride, and then her glory is given to God. Now that's why Jesus is the ultimate Nazirite. Can you follow this now? Jesus comes, and what grows from him, we are attached to him. We are the hair that grows from Jesus' consecrated head, and we are offered up to God. That's the picture. Okay? So the hair that grows from the man's head represents the bride, and that is given to God. So we are the hair that grows from Jesus' head, just as Eve was taken from Adam's side. So we grow from Jesus' consecrated head. That's what this symbolic package means. We grow from Jesus' head, and then we are given to God. And the Nazirite, what he is supposed to do, his holy work, is in the service of God's bride. Israel, God's bride, the church. Now, who's the other example of that? The clearest one, Jesus and also Paul. What does Paul do on his missionary journeys? He's going around building up the bride. And the whole time he's out there building up the bride, his hair is growing, which represents the bride of Christ, and then he gives it to God. And he says, I'm doing this so that I can present you as a pure virgin to God. 2 Corinthians 11. And then he goes on the third missionary journey, and he starts to grow his hair again, as that hair that's on his head represents the bride, Jesus' bride, the church, and then it's offered up to God. Samson is the same thing. Samson, Samuel, John the Baptist, the glory that is growing out of their head represents the bride. And they are stewards of God's bride. And so they dedicate their head, and the glory that grows out from their head and the effects of their works are to glorify and protect the bride. And then she is given to God, because the church does not belong to us, it belongs to God. So we cut off our hair and send it to God. You see, your minister can never think that this is his church. We say that, well, over at my church. Well, we all know what that means, but if you pushed it and meant it the wrong way, no, it's not my church. I'm just the levirate husband of this church, okay? Jesus is the real husband. He's away, so I'm taking care of things. And all the hair that grows in this church has to be offered up to God. Your minister is here to glorify you. He has to stay ugly so you can be pretty. That's why he wears a black shirt and black robe and all this stuff. Not really. But you could. and that would be what it would mean. Now, if you haven't followed that, it's okay. But I wanted, for the sake of completeness, to give it to you so that you'd have some idea of what this long hair business is all about. The long hair that grows out of his consecrated head refers to the works that he does during that consecrated period, and specifically it refers to the benefits that he gives to the bride of the Lord. She is the glory. Man's glory is the woman. The woman's glory is her hair and her jewelry and her clothing and everything else, but the man's glory is his wife. So guys, we have to dress kind of plain and let our wives be the beautiful ones. And that's right. And as we see paganism creeping back into our society, we're seeing men cuting themselves up again, and it makes me want to, that's enough on that. Now, what are these rules? The Nazirite has to come under these special rules for the time that he is doing his special service for the bride. What are these rules? First of all, he's not allowed to have any alcoholic beverages. So, Numbers chapter 6. He will abstain from wine and beer. He will drink no vinegar, whether made from wine or beer. Then it goes on and says, neither shall he drink any grape juice, nor eat fresh or dried grapes all the days of his separation. He shall not eat anything that is produced by the grapevine, from the seeds to the skin. You notice that these are two different things here. Wine and strong drink are grouped together because they're alcoholic. And that is one zone of meaning. And then grapes and raisins and grape leaves and grape stems, they're all grouped together because that's a different zone of meaning. Okay, that's why I was saying last night, grape juice is not a substitute for wine. Strong drink would be, but grape juice would not be, because in the Bible, grapes and grape leaves and raisins and grape juice has one set of meanings, whereas wine and strong drink have another set of meanings. What is the meaning of wine and strong drink? Well, what they mean is rest and peace and shalom. You take down a slug of wine and you feel your body go, huh. Okay? Scares people sometimes if they're not used to it. But there is shalom, there is peace in the effect of alcohol. And if you haven't had much of anything to eat, or if you're a small child, or if you're not used to drinking wine, it will actually hit you in the stomach. You know, you'll feel just relaxation take place. And that is part of the Lord's Supper, to have that feeling of rest and peace and warmth that comes as part of it. And the reason that you get that, the reason you get to have that, is because your work is finished. There are two kinds of food here. There's bread food and there's wine food. In the morning when you get up, you have toast. And maybe you have some grape juice, because that's alpha food to get you going. But at night when you finished your work, you come home, you take your shoes off, and your children run and bring you your slippers. Ha 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 ha. And your wife brings you a drink of Coke or some Diet Coke. Oh, there's a Diet Coke here. You relax, and then you might have a glass of wine because you're relaxing. You finished your work. It's omega food. Alpha food, bread in the morning. Omega food, wine in the evening. You would not have a glass of wine in the morning to start the day off. Not if you're smart. Okay? That's the difference. Now, in the Old Testament, people were often not allowed to drink wine with God because the work had not been done. It says in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 9, the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, do not drink wine or beer, neither your sons with you, when you come into the tent of meeting, so that you may not die. God says, I'll kill you if you drink wine or beer in my presence, so as to make a distinction between the holy and the profane, between the unclean and the clean. Now, because of our American background and the alcoholophobia that we have, because alcohol has been abused by people in our culture, we would tend to think that, well, to make a distinction between the holy and the profane means that the wine is profane, and because they're holy, they're not supposed to have it when they go into the tent of meeting, but that's actually the opposite of the case. Wine is holy. Wine is God's drink. And God says, you're not holy enough to have a glass of wine with me in my presence. I don't allow it. Judges chapter 9, verse 13 talks about wine. And the vine said, this is what the vine says in the parable of Jotham. You don't need to turn here. I'm going to go through some passages pretty quick. But Judges 9:13, the vine said to them, shall I leave my new wine, which cheers God and men? Wine not only cheers men, but it cheers up God. That's what he says. That's what the Holy Spirit writes here under divine inspiration. Whatever that means, it means that wine belongs to God. And in Psalm 104, verse 15, we read, wine makes man's heart glad, so that he may make his face glisten with oil. Okay? Wine makes the heart glad. It makes God's heart glad, and wine belongs to God. Now, this is our problem in our society. If you give alcohol over to the devil, people will abuse it. If you bring alcohol into the church and say it's God's special drink, drink with other Christians, drink with the Lord in the Lord's Supper, then you have sanctified it, and people are much less likely to abuse it. You might think about that. At any rate, in Israel and throughout most of Christian history, people learn to drink temperately, and that's appropriate. Now, why weren't they allowed to drink wine with God in the Old Testament? We are. Every Sunday you come here, and you come into God's holy presence, and you have a sip of wine. Okay? Maybe you were afraid the first time you had it, but you had it. But they weren't allowed to back then, and you are now. What's the difference? Jesus has finished his work and has entered into his rest. That's the difference. Now, wine is for the Sabbath, and as a sign to them that they would get to have wine in the Sabbath year, God tells them that in the 7th month, in the Festival of Tabernacles, they could all get together and make merry before the Lord, not in the tabernacle, but at the feast. He says in Deuteronomy 14, verse 26, that the people can take their tithe and spend the money for whatever your heart desires, for oxen, for sheep, for wine, or beer, or whatever your heart desires, and you shall eat in the presence of Yahweh your God, and make merry, you and your household. So once a year in Israel, they had this big Bible camp at the Feast of Tabernacles, and they studied the Bible for all 7 days, and at night they could make merry. And they could pig out. Well, they couldn't pig out, but they could sheep out, and they could beef out, and they could have wine and beer. Okay? They weren't supposed to be drunkards. The Bible warns us about that. But they could make merry before the Lord because it was the Sabbath month, and it was a sign that the work was finished. The harvest was over, and that pointed to the finished work of Jesus Christ. Similarly, and this is important for us in considering the Nazirite, in Genesis chapter 14, we have the occasion where Chedorlaomer and his guys captured Lot and started taking him back to Mesopotamia. And Abraham took his fighting men, and he rescued Lot, and he rescued all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and Admah and Zeboim and Bela, and he brought them back. And the king of Sodom comes out and he offers a reward to Abraham, and Abraham says no. And then we read, Melchizedek, the king of Salem, brought out bread and wine to Abram. And you know that this refers to Jesus, and Jesus gives us bread and wine. And Abraham gave him a tithe, so Jesus gives us bread and wine, and we give him a tithe. That's the deal. And you do that on Sundays. If you are a child of Abraham, if you have the faith of Abraham, you owe a tithe, and that's 10%, not whatever you feel like giving, and you get bread and wine from Jesus, from Melchizedek. And I know you studied Hebrews sometime in the past, maybe recently, and so you know about this. Well, after the battle, Abraham gets wine from Melchizedek. The same thing's true of the Nazirite, you see. After the Nazirite has finished his holy war work, it says very explicitly, this is the climax statement. He does all these sacrifices, and then it says, and afterward the Nazirite may drink wine. The battle's over. You can rest. The work is finished. And Jesus can drink wine with us in the kingdom because he has finished the work. Now, when did Samson get to drink wine? When did Samuel get to drink wine? When did John the forerunner get to drink wine? Never. Because their work was never finished. That's sad. But you see, Jesus came and He finished it. That's the point. Jesus finished this work that these guys never were able to finish. The temporary Nazirites, they would finish their work and cut their hair off. But you see, the others never cut their hair off. Samson got his cut off, and that was a big mistake. It wasn't offered to the Lord. But they weren't supposed to cut their hair off, ever, because their work was never finished. Do you have some feeling then for this business of no wine? It means that your work is not finished. You don't get to rest. You don't get to let your hair down or cut it off. You don't get to take your shoes off. You don't get to put on your robe. You don't get to relax because your work is never done. And if it is done, why? Then it's Sabbath time and we can rest and we can have a glass of wine with Jesus because the work is done. That's what it means. So during the days that the Nazirite is doing his work, he or she doesn't drink wine. Second of all, no grapes. No grapes, no raisins, no raisin bran, no grape leaves, no nothing. No grape seeds, nothing connected with grapes. Why? Well, it's not quite the same meaning. Grapes are a sign of the blessing of the Holy Land. And you'll remember this from Numbers 13, that when the spies went into the Holy Land to spy it out, what did they come back with? Great big clusters of grapes. And all those grapes that they brought back was the big picture that this was a land that flows with milk and honey and bursts with grapes. During the days of his vow, the Nazirite is cut off from this blessing of the land. Everybody else gets to have grapes and raisins. Grape harvest comes in and everybody's popping grapes. The Nazirite has to just have dates instead. And no grapes for him. Now during the year of Jubilee, everybody had to forego it. It says in Leviticus chapter 25, during the year of Jubilee, the land grows out its vines, and it says, you shall not gather the trimmed vines in the sabbatical year. You shall not sow nor reap its aftergrowth. You shall not gather in from the untrimmed vines. During the Sabbath year and the year of Jubilee, nobody could eat any grapes. If they had some raisins left over from the last year, they could eat them, but they'd be pretty hard by that time. But they couldn't eat any grapes. So they weren't allowed to take any of those things during that time, because during that year, the vines were allowed to grow out all over. You know what the word for untrimmed vines is? It's the word Nazir. The land itself was kind of growing out a bunch of hair that year with vines everywhere, and they were supposed to leave them alone and not eat the grapes. Now, the grapes in the land is a sign of blessing. But the grapes are forbidden during the Sabbath year because the Sabbath is still to come in Christ. Now we can have grapes. The Nazirite sets aside grapes because he is setting aside some of the blessings of the land. He's fasting from grapes. Kind of interesting, the church has always had fast days and fasted from meat. Nobody ever has to fast from meat in the Bible. In fact, I'm just going to say this because I think it's important. The diet of the priests was a very high cholesterol diet. They got to eat the leg and the shoulder of all these sacrifices of sheep. Okay? You ever roast a leg of lamb? You know how fatty it is? And then they got to eat cows. And they got to eat turtle doves and pigeons too, but there's not much to that. In fact, they didn't get to eat those. Those were burned up. Nope, it was just goats and sheep and cows they got to eat parts of. That's what they ate. So when people say you shouldn't eat much red meat, just eat red meat once a month, forget it. Your priests, chow down on that red meat as often as you want. I'll tell you something. 100 years from now, medical science will not be telling us the same thing it's saying now. Some of you have lived long enough to know that this stuff changed. I remember my father, for the last 20 years of his life, because of cholesterol, he wouldn't eat eggs. He loved eggs, but he stopped eating them. Now they say you can eat eggs. And people say, oh, well, you shouldn't have salt. Jesus says salt is good. Salt it on there, folks. I know you can have too much of a good thing. You can drink too much wine, you can eat too much salt. I have to be careful with salt. Why am I drinking this Diet Coke? It's got sodium in it, but not too much. But, you know, we've just got stuff floats through this country about medicine that needs to be tempered. If you are a person for whom cholesterol is a problem, then you as an individual may need to have more chicken and less beef. But in the Bible, God was feeding them an awful fatty diet. Now, the ordinary Israelite didn't get to eat this stuff all the time. I mean, you can kill a cow every week and eat it. But the priests did. Either they didn't live very long, or else it's not all that bad for you. How'd I get off on that? It's this Diet Coke. It makes me say things that I shouldn't say. At any rate, they didn't fast from meat. But they did fast from grapes. Grapes were the sign of the blessing of the Holy Land. It was one of them. Honey is another one, as we'll see. But Samson produces honey, as we'll see. Let's see, we've already discussed the hair. Finally, we have to discuss the dead bodies. Okay? The Israelites had to fight and take the land before they got those grapes. And the Nazirite has got to fight his battle before he can have the grapes. So that's the meaning. Long hair, glory is given to God when finished, and fine death, corpses to be avoided, and there is no public mourning. That's what this means. He shall not go near a dead person. Now, ordinarily you could. Going near a dead person made you unclean. But it is not a sin to become unclean. According to Leviticus chapter 15, one of those chapters that you skipped when you read the Bible this year, I bet. Or you read it and it went in one eye and out the other, because it's hard to read this stuff. We don't understand it. But we're told there that 7 days out of every month, women are unclean. Every time a man and a woman have physical relations, they are both unclean. Whenever a child is born, the woman is unclean for 80 days if it's a girl and 40 days if it's a boy, which is why it's better to have boys. Not really. It's because the boys are circumcised that the time is cut in half. Now, there's nothing wrong with having babies. There's nothing wrong with marital relations. There's nothing sinful about being on your cycle. There's nothing sinful about having white spots show up on your skin. But if these things happen, you are unclean. And uncleanness only means one thing. It means you can't go to church until you're clean. Now, actually, you could go to the synagogue, but you couldn't go and offer a sacrifice. That's all. And if it happened during Passover week, well, you just had to miss out on Passover. But they had a second Passover in the next month that you could go to. So that there was an extra Passover in the second month. If anybody was unclean during the first month, they could go to the Passover in the second month and make it up. And if they were unclean during both months, then they just had to wait till next year. That's all it meant. And so if someone in your family died, you had to prepare them for burial. Anybody who came into the same room with the corpse was unclean for 7 days. This is Numbers chapter 19. For 7 days afterwards, you couldn't go to the tent. If you had been planning to go offer a sacrifice, you'd have to put it off. And since you didn't do that very often anyway, it wasn't that big a problem. You were not forbidden to be in the same room with the body of a loved one to prepare it for burial. It would be a normal thing in Israel. Every time somebody died, there'd be a group of people, family and friends, who would be unclean for a week afterwards. But if you're a Nazirite, you weren't allowed to do that. If you're a Nazirite and you had taken a Nazirite vow and your father or your mother or your brother or your sister died, you would have to stay out of the room where the body was. And you would not be allowed to touch the body. Now, if they brought the body out in the open, you could view it and so forth, but you were not allowed to go into a room with it or touch it. Not allowed to be that close to death. You are not allowed to have death come upon you, because if you did, it wrecked your vow and you'd have to start over again. If somebody actually died next to you, if you were just talking to a friend and he had a heart attack, you would be unclean for 7 days and you'd have to start over again with your vow. Death. There's no problem if you're a Nazirite and you kill somebody, because Nazirites were supposed to be killers and head crushers. Killing somebody is different from, it's the same with animals, by the way. If you butcher a cow, you eat it. It doesn't make you unclean. But if you come out in the field and your cow has died by itself and you touch it, you become unclean. Something that is killed by man, human beings are the priests of creation, it doesn't make you unclean. So Samson did not become unclean or break his vow when he fought the Philistines and killed them. But if somebody had died next to him, he'd have to shave his head and start over again. And when his mother and father died, he was not allowed to be the one to prepare the body. Somebody else had to go in and prepare the body and get it ready for the burial, because he couldn't go into the same room with them. Why? Because this work has to be done in the context of life and not of death. That's what it means. This work has to be done in a context of life instead of death. Now, with that as background, we can go back now and look at the story of Samson. And we can get into it a little bit tonight. We will do chapter 13. And then tomorrow in the services we will consider the stories that are more familiar. But I know you didn't want me to come here and tell you things you already knew, and we wanted to get some background. So let's go down to Numbers chapter 13, and we are moving to page 5. And we'll start again. This verse 2. There was a certain man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah. Now, the Danites were located, I might as well show you this. Here's Israel, and here's Judah, and the Danites are right here. There's another group of Danites that went way up here and apostatized from the faith, and that's in Judges 17 and 18. But the faithful Danites were down here, and the Philistines are located right along the coast here. This is the Philistine territory. So Dan and Judah, Eli and Samuel are down here working in this area, and Samson is working up in this area. So this is the general area of Philistine domination in the south at this time. His wife was barren and had no children. Verse 3, the angel of Yahweh appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, now you are barren and have borne no children, and you shall conceive and give birth to a son. Therefore be careful not to drink wine or strong drink. Drink wine or beer. Don't eat any unclean thing. That's forbidden in Leviticus 11. You are not allowed to eat unclean food, and so he reminds her that she mustn't. And you will conceive and give birth to a son, and no razor shall come on his head, for the boy shall be a Nazirite from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Now, this beginning of things here that God does, it's important for us to set this in a wider context too. If you go back to Genesis, you find that this theme of barren women has already been enunciated in the book of Genesis. And it's an important theme, because God came to Eve and he said, I will multiply your difficulty and tribulation in childbearing. And the ultimate form of the multiplication of tribulation in childbearing is not even to be able to conceive in the first place. The next thing down from that is for the woman to die giving birth, which Rachel does. You remember, Rachel dies giving birth to Benjamin. But not even to be able to conceive in the first place would be the ultimate tribulation. And that's really important, because God had said to the serpent, I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. You will bruise his heel, but he will crush your head. So the seed of the woman is going to be a head crusher. It's going to be a Nazirite. But if the woman is barren, then there isn't going to be any head-crushing seed, is there? So it is a major problem. How are we ever going to have the Messiah come into the world if the woman is sterile and can't have a child? And that's the problem Abraham faces. And so God has to do a miracle. Sarah not only is barren her whole life, but she's gone through the change of life, and it's unthinkable for her to have a child, and yet God does a miracle and opens her womb, and she has Isaac. Then Isaac marries Rebekah, and what do you know? Rebekah can't have any children. So God does a miracle and opens Rebekah's womb, and she has a child. Has two children. And then Jacob marries Rachel, and what do you know? Rachel is barren and can't have any children. So God miraculously opens her womb. By now, the point is pretty clear. If the Messiah is going to be born, it is not going to come out of nature. Okay? God is going to have to do miracles in order to bring the Messiah into the world. But that's not the only feature here. You'll notice that Samson's mother, who is the mother of a Nazirite, a seed, a head crusher, a Satan beater-upper, she's barren and can't have children. What about Samuel's mother? Hannah. What do you know? She was barren and couldn't have children. What about Elizabeth, John the Baptist, John the Forerunner's mother? What about her? She was barren. So in every case of these three permanent Nazirites, God has to do a miracle in order to open the womb. Now the ultimate fulfillment of that, of course, is the virgin birth. Because Mary is the ultimate woman who couldn't possibly conceive, you see. She wasn't necessarily barren, but it would be impossible for her to have a child. And so these miracles, these 6 miracles in the Old Testament, the 3 patriarch mothers and the 3 Nazirite mothers, the miracles of opening their womb and bringing a miraculous child into the world, the fulfillment of that is the opening of Mary's womb and the bringing of Jesus into the world. So it is a miracle when God produces the miraculous head crusher, and Samson is going to be a picture of that to Israel and something that they will learn from. Then it says in verses 6 and 7 of chapter 13, Then the woman came and told her husband, saying, A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of the angel of God, very awesome. And I did not ask him where he came from, nor did he tell me his name. But he said to me, Behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and now you shall not drink wine or beer or eat any unclean thing, for the boy shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death. Okay. That's the first thing that happens, the first visitation. I want you to notice that the angel of the Lord, Jesus Christ, appeared to the woman. You'll notice that her name is not given. Manoah's name is given, and she's just called the wife of Manoah. Now that's the first thing, this appearance. Now we have a second visitation in verses 8 to 14. Then Manoah entreated Yahweh and said, O Master, please let the man of God whom thou hast sent come to us again, that he may teach us what to do for the boy who is to be born. And God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman. Didn't come to him, came to the woman, as she was sitting in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, and said to him, Behold, the man who came the other day has appeared to me. Then Manoah arose and followed his wife, and when he came to the man, he said to him, Are you the man who spoke to the woman? And he said, I am. And Manoah said, Now, when your words come to pass, what shall be the boy's mode of life and his vocation? And the angel of Yahweh said to Manoah, Let the woman pay attention to all I said. She should not eat anything that comes from the vine, nor drink wine or beer, or eat any unclean thing. Let her observe all I commanded. Do you know the woman's name yet? No. We got Manoah's name. We just got woman here. That's because women aren't important. We don't need to know their names. That's not why. No, that's not why. And you'll notice that the angel, Manoah prays, but the angel appears to the woman, and she's alone. Manoah isn't even with her. She has to go get him, and he has to follow her back. And then Manoah says, Now, would you tell me again? Would you tell me so I can hear? And he says, Look, tell the woman's supposed to do what I said. I mean, this whole thing is focused in on the woman, but her name isn't given. Well, then Manoah, verses 15 and following, Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, Please let us detain you so that we may prepare a kid for you. A kid is a young goat. okay, who is going to be fixed up as food for this man. They haven't figured out yet that this is not a man. The angel of Yahweh said to Manoah, though you detain me, I will not eat your bread, your food. But if you prepare an ascension offering, that's what it says in Hebrew. Your Bible says burnt offering, but it's literally an ascension offering, something that goes up. Then offer it to Yahweh. For Manoah did not realize that he was the angel of Yahweh. And Manoah said to the angel of Yahweh, what is your name, so that when your words come to pass, we may honor you? Thinking that he's a prophet. The angel of Yahweh said to him, why do you ask my name, seeing that it is wonderful? So Manoah took the kid and the tribute offering, your Bible says grain offering, but literally it's a tribute, and offered it on the rock to Yahweh. And the Lord God performed wonders. He whose name is wonderful did wonders while Manoah and his wife looked on. For it came about when the flame went up from the altar toward heaven, ascending, you see, that the angel of Yahweh ascended in the flame of the altar. When Manoah and his wife saw this, they fell on their faces to the ground. Now the angel of Yahweh appeared no more to Manoah or his wife. Then Manoah knew that he was the angel of Yahweh. So Manoah said to his wife, we shall surely die, for we have seen God. But his wife said to him, if Yahweh had desired to kill us, he would not have accepted an ascension offering and a tribute offering from our hands. Nor would he have showed us all these things, nor would he have let us hear things like this at this time. Now, what's going on here? Well, do you know the woman's name? No? We never do get it, do we? She's just the wife of Manoah, or actually, the woman. What is the Holy Spirit, what is Samuel, who probably wrote this book, trying to do by leaving her name out? He's focusing our attention on the fact that she is the woman. So who is she? Theologically. She is the woman. I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. This is the woman who gives birth to the seed. This is Eve. It is Israel. It's this woman who gives birth to the seed. It's the woman who is in the sky in Revelation chapter 12 who gives birth to a son who will rule the nations. It is the woman. That's why he leaves the name out, so that we make the connection. That this is the seed of the woman who's being born here. This is an expression of the seed of the woman principle. And this is somebody that's going to crush Satan's head. And he's going to crush Satan's head big time. This is the climax of the book of Judges. Okay, remember the heads are political leaders. And he crushes all 5 of the Philistine kings and all of their commanders and all of their priests. All of them had their heads crushed with all these rocks that fall on them when the temple falls. Talk about stones falling on people. You're going to have stones fall on people big time before this story's over. Head crusher. This is the seed of the woman. We're given her husband's name, but we're not given her name. We are given his name. Why did we get his name? Who cares about him? If we're not going to get her name, and she's the important one here, who cares about him? I mean, he is the one who is going to be the father of this child in one sense, but in another sense, the Lord is the father of this child because the Lord does a miracle to make it happen. Okay. But who cares about this guy Manoah? Well, you care about him if you know what Manoah means. It is the word Noah. Remember Noah in the ark? Remember what Noah means? It means rest. And Noah means rest. It's a form of the word Noah. His name is rest. But you see, there is no rest. But the Son of Rest will bring rest to Israel. And so that is the theme here, and that's why the name is given. Rest is going to come. But at this point, there is no rest. In fact, there is no discernment. Neither one of these people recognized who the angel of the Lord was when he appeared. They thought he was just a man. They couldn't see past what looked like a man to see that there was more here. The woman, she has more contact with him, so she figures it out first, but Manoah doesn't figure it out till later. when the angel goes up in the fire. And when Manoah figures it out, he says, we're in trouble now, because Israel has sinned, and we've been given into the hands of the Philistines, and if God has come among us, it must be over. It's curtains. But his wife has been thinking about it a little bit longer, and she says, no, I figure that if he was going to kill us, he'd have done it right out. We wouldn't have gotten this promise if that was his intention. Now, why do we have this other stuff in here? Manoah is just being hospitable. He says, and this shows that he's a good man. He offers hospitality. He's not like those people in Sodom and Gibeah, but he's like Abraham and Lot. He offers hospitality. And the Lord says, I will not eat a meal with you. Now, tomorrow the Lord is going to eat a meal with us. And what is that meal a sign of? It's a sign that we have peace with God. You don't eat with somebody if you're unhappy with them. Have you ever been at odds with somebody, maybe in business, somebody that you've had a major conflict with, or one of you ladies has had a fight with one of the ladies in the church, or something else? I know y'all never have that problem, but things like that happen, and then they say, why don't we get together and go out and have lunch together? And you think, I don't want to have lunch with them. Let's talk about this over lunch. Well, lunch is not when you want to talk through stuff like this, especially if he wants to pay for it. No, you don't want to do that. Let's not have lunch. Let's talk it over, and then we'll hug each other, and then we'll have lunch, okay? You don't feel like eating when you're around somebody that you're at serious odds with. God doesn't want to eat with them. God's mad at them because they've sinned. There's no peace yet. But he does allow them to offer an ascension offering. Now, when an ascension offering is offered, blood is spilled out for God to see. That is the essence of how the ascension offering or the burnt offering is done. The blood is splashed against the side of the altar, and that's Passover. At Passover, remember, they took the blood and they put it out here on the doorposts on both sides and on the top so that God would look at it. And God would pass them by because God would say, okay, I see this blood, and I will pass them by because the sacrifice has been made. Well, every time a sacrifice was made, they'd take the altar and they would splash blood against it, and God would see it. Because God was on His throne in the Holy of Holies right here, and He would look out through the holy place down to the altar, and He would see the blood right here. And so every single sacrifice was another Passover where blood was splashed out for God to see. And once God sees the blood, then He is at peace with them. And after the blood is displayed, then the animal is put here and is allowed to ascend up into God's presence, and God will receive the animal as a sweet savor. But the blood has to be put out there and displayed first. God allowed that. Now let me ask you something. What made it possible for Samson to deliver Israel? Is it because he was strong and God gave him a bunch of muscles and God gave him a bunch of smarts? As we'll see tomorrow, Samson is very smart. No. What made it possible for God to deliver Israel was this sacrifice right here. That's the transition. And you'll see this in the book of Judges and throughout the Bible. That Israel goes into battle and they lose the battle. And they go into battle again and they lose the battle. And then they offer a sacrifice and the blood is displayed and God's attitude changes toward them, and then they go out and they're victorious. The transition from wrath to grace is at the point of the sacrifice. The blood being spilled. And so we are under the wrath of God. God makes His promise, but they're still under the wrath of God. And then the kid is sacrificed, which represents the sacrifice of Jesus. And then Samson can be born with all this special power of the Holy Spirit and go forth victorious. The Holy Spirit is poured out after the crucifixion, right? And Samson is going to be powerfully endued with the Holy Spirit, and that comes after this sacrifice. So first the sacrifice, and then the pouring out of the Holy Spirit to make Samson strong. And now we're pretty much done here. Just one more thing to notice. It says in verse 24, oh no, there's two things to notice. I'm sorry. I was almost going to let you go, and I'm not going to do that. The angel says, why do you ask my name, seeing that it is full of wonders? And then it says that while the sacrifice was being made, the angel performed wonders while they looked on, and then the angel ascended back up into heaven. Why is this emphasis on wonders here? The God whose name is full of wonders, and He does wonders. And then His Spirit is sent to who? Whom? Samson. And what is Samson going to do? Y'all are sleepy. Samson's going to do wonders. I mean, tying 300 foxes' tails together, that's amazing. And Samson does other amazing, amazing things. And these wonders that Samson does comes about because the God who is full of wonders puts the spirit of wonders upon Samson, and Samson will do wonders. Now that's what happens at Pentecost. The Holy Spirit sent to us so we can do wonders. You won't be carrying away the gates of the city, except spiritually speaking, but we do wonders, okay? And now finally we read this in verses 24 and 25. Then the woman gave birth to a son and named him Samson, which means sun, S-U-N, sunrise. And the child grew up, and Yahweh blessed him. And the Spirit of Yahweh began to stir him in the camp of Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. Okay, Samson, the sunrise. Very quickly, we need to understand where this comes from. Back in Genesis chapter 1, it says that God set up the sun, moon, and stars to be signs, that is, symbols. And so the sun is one of the symbols of the kingdom of God, and especially of the hero. And in Genesis chapter 32, we find that Jacob wrestles with the angel all night long, and God has enabled Jacob to be strong enough to where Jacob can succeed in wrestling with him. And Jacob has been wrestling for the blessing, and God gives him the blessing. And then it says in verse 31 of Genesis 32, now the sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Penuel, and he was limping on his thigh. So you've got to see this picture that Jacob is crossing the river into the promised land, and as he crosses, the sun bursts up behind him as a symbol of his strength. He's 97 years old now, Jacob is, and God's been wrestling with him his whole life to make him strong and mature, and God says, you are now strong enough and mature enough to wrestle with me all night, and I'm going to bless you, and you can go across into the land. And I'm not going to crush your head, I'm just going to bruise your heel. You know, everybody gets out of life with either their head crushed or their heel bruised. So which would you rather have? I'd rather have the limp myself. You ever wonder why the church limps through history? This is why. Because the limp is a sign of salvation. And Jacob has that. And the sun coming up is a sign of Jacob's strength that God has given him through this process. Now, in Judges, Deborah makes reference to that. In Judges 5, verse 31, at the end of her song, Deborah says, thus let all thine enemies perish, O Lord, but let those who love him be like the rising of the sun in its might. Deborah prays that God's people will be like the rising of the sun in its might as it bursts over the horizon. Let everybody be like Jacob, somebody that can wrestle with God and as a result also wrestle with the enemy. Well, Deborah's prayer is answered immediately in the next story. The story of Gideon. Gideon goes and he fights all night long against Oreb and Zeeb and Zebah and Zalmunna. And then in Judges chapter 8, verse 13, we read that Gideon comes back into the promised land as the sun rises. Judges 8, verse 13, then Gideon the son of Joash returned from the battle at the rising of the sun. Now your Bible may say at the ascent of Heres, but Heres is the other word for sun. And this is saying that he came back as the sun rose. But of course the next and biggest fulfillment of that in Judges is Samson. Samson is the sun. He is the strong man. He is the mighty one. And Samson is referred to in Psalm 19, where it says the heavens are telling the glory of God. And then it says, the sun is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. It rejoices as a strong man to run its course. And that is what Samson is. Samson is the bridegroom. All three of Samson's stories concern his relationship with women. And the first story is all about his being a powerful bridegroom. And so David is referring back to Samson here. And also, it says that God's word is more desirable than gold and sweeter also than honey and the drippings of the honeycomb. That also refers back to Samson, who gets the honey out of the lion. And of course, we'll be looking at that tomorrow. But Samson restores the land of milk and honey out of the dead Philistine lion. And we'll be looking at that tomorrow. But there are allusions to Samson in that psalm. You see, Samson is the son. Jesus ultimately is the Son. He is the Son of righteousness who rises with healing in his wings, according to Malachi. And in Revelation chapter 1, verse 16, Jesus appears with his face shining like the sun in its strength. So that's where Samson fits in. Okay? He is another Jacob, powerful because God's Spirit makes him strong. He's an answer to Deborah's prayer that God would give sunrise champions. Gideon, Samson, Jesus, sunrise champions. And that's what Samson is. So now tomorrow, we will look at the three stories of what Samson actually does now that he's ready as a Nazirite, as a head crusher extraordinary. But I'm sorry I took so long, but I did want to get through all this tonight.